Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya and this week we will take a look at INS Arihant. India's first indigenous nuclear ballistic missile submarine INS Arihant, which was literally translates to annihilator of enemies, has recently successfully completed its first deterrence patrol. This means the sub is fully operational and India now has a fully functional nuclear triad, sixth country in the world to have this power. United States of America, Russia, China, UK and France are the other 5 nations who have a nuclear triad. INS Arihant is the first product of India's top secret advanced technologically vessel project, which began in late 90s to construct the SSPNs or underwater leg of the nuclear triad. 6,000-ton Arihant was launched on 26th of July 2009 and commissioned into the Indian Navy in 2016. It is armed with K-15 missiles with a range of 750 kilometers. So what is the importance of India having a nuclear triad and how INS Arihant gives more heft to the Indian Defence Forces? For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me begin by starting an introduction with them. We have with us retired Commodore Anil Jay Singh, the Vice President of Indian Maritime Foundation and a submariner himself. And we also have with us retired Commodore Abhijit Singh, Head of Maritime Policy Initiative, ORF. And we also have with us Saikat Datta, the South Asia Editor of Asia Times. Welcome, gentlemen, all of you to Rajya Sabha Television Studios. Let's begin with you, Commodore Singh, to try and understand 2 separate aspects here. One is what do we mean when we say that India has now a fully operational nuclear triad? That's one. And second, how come INS Arihant becomes a very crucial part of this entire situation?
You see, any nuclear deterrence is through a triad. It's a land, air and sea element. So we already had the land element, we had the air element, and what was lacking was the sea element. Now in our case, because we have a no first use policy, it obviously means that we must have a very potent second strike capability. And so the submarine is the only platform which provides that potency and the credibility to your second strike capability, because it is something that is operating away from human eyes. Nobody knows where it is. It's somewhere at sea, and it could launch a second strike from just about anywhere. So even in a first strike, if your complete land and air assets are neutralized, you still have the second strike capability available to you. In fact, if you look at the Cold War, which went on for 40 odd years, I think the thing that kept it really cold was the fact that both sides had submarines which could destroy the others, which could annihilate totally the other country. So from that perspective, Arihant becomes a very important aspect because it validates our whole nuclear doctrine. Insofar as this particular event is concerned about finishing a deterrent patrol successfully, it also validates your complete command and control structure that you've established for a nuclear platform. For example, in a submarine, the submarine is thousands of miles away from land, hundreds of meters below the sea, and it should be able to launch a strike when directed to do so. For that, you need a very complex sort of command and control structure. We have what I think we call it the Nuclear Command Authority, and this patrol would have validated that as well.
Okay.
Third thing is, it validates the competence of the crew to be able to undertake a full-fledged patrol with nuclear weapons on board, which has its own dynamics of deployment, unlike conventional submarines. So I think overall it achieves a lot and is a great springboard for where we are going to go further in deterrence.
Okay, we'll talk about the specifics of INS Arihant and its characteristics as well, but let's as of now stick to the nuclear triad issue, and let's bring in Commodore Abhijit as well here. With this deterrence patrol being successful, it is being said that India joins the elite club of nations which has the nuclear triad. 5 of them I just mentioned in the initial remarks. 6th would be India. How does that, places India on the overall geopolitical map, and specifically, what kind of elbow room will India have out?
See, there's 2 things that I'd like to emphasize about the development of the Arihant. Firstly, if you look at the sea-based component of the triad, it is usually said to be the most survivable component. And the reason why it's more survivable is that the sea forces or the sea-based component doesn't face what analysts have called the use it or lose it dilemma. which means that if you look at land forces or if you look at air forces that carry the nuclear weapon, there is always the danger that the adversary knows where these forces are placed, and the adversary can take you out in a first strike, in a counter value hit. That danger is not there at sea, because at sea you are deep down in the ocean, submerged in the depths. There's no way the enemy can know where you are. And so you don't face really that dilemma that if you don't use your weapons, you lose your weapons.
So it's the most important element of the
It's the most
triad.
important element. So the first thing that we need to be clear about is the reason why there's so much of discussion about the Arihant and the fact that it has finished its first deterrent patrol is that this is the most survivable element, and we just validated, as Commodore A.J. Singh very correctly pointed out, this most critical part of the triad. The second important part about the triad or the sea-based leg is that it's the hardest to actualize or operationalize. And the reason is that there is a great financial squeeze that it imposes over the whole organization to get this thing through. If you look at the Arihant, it's been 40 years nearly in the making, in the sense that since the time we launched this program, in the way that it developed over a period of time, we now finally have managed to do the deterrent patrol. So what it does is, and this gets to the question that you were asking, that this places you in a select club. So there is a very political sort of dimension to developing the sea-based triad that land forces and air forces don't have. So now this means that we're part of the select 5. Now this is now select group of 6. It also means that we have some kind of an operational agency now in the Indian Ocean region that cannot be matched by other regional powers. So I'd say that this is quite an achievement. Having said that, one thing that I'd like to add, we have to desist from the urge to be triumphalist. The thing about a nuclear triad or a nuclear-based component, sea component, is that the more you advertise it, the more you talk about it, the less credible it seems to the adversary.
Okay.
It shouldn't seem as if you're drawing political mileage out of it, because the adversary then feels that you're only using it for posturing. And I got a sense after this whole development happened that there was a great deal of talk about the fact that we were going on these deterrent patrols. The Chinese, for instance, when they tested their Jin class, since '95 it's been on, since 2015 it's been on deterrent patrols. They never talked about it. We never knew what the Chinese are doing in the South China Sea. In our case, we are going and talking about it as if it's a major achievement. Now, it may be an achievement, but we shouldn't crow about it, because that brings down the legitimacy and the credibility of our own deterrent.
Okay, let's bring in Saikat on that part as well.
I'll just elaborate a little further than what Commodore Singh and Commander Avijit Singh have already said. You know, the best way to track down a submarine is through acoustics. And usually what happens is that when a submarine surfaces, a conventional submarine has to surface at periodic intervals, is when it is caught. But what a nuclear submarine does is that it can stay underwater for, even for months, which makes detection almost impossible. And also when you look at projection of power, and especially military power, Navy and naval forces are the only forces which actually show you how far you can go, because they are the true projection of power. So when America or Russia or any of the major powers used to project power, they would show it through a carrier battle group or a nuclear submarine. So India has one carrier today, but the fact that it has now developed an underwater nuclear caliber, which can go quite far, puts you in a different league altogether. And you have to also look at it that our challenges, because of our geopolitical and economic interests, our challenges are also increasing. While the IOR is the Indian Ocean region is a major area for us to, dominate, we also have to look at what's happening in the South China Sea, because today we happen to be in a tough neighborhood. We have Pakistan on one side and China on the other side. So if things start going wrong in the Himalayas, and we've had a history there, then the best way would be to try and create a deterrent in the South China Sea.
Okay.
So the Arihant gives you all those capabilities. And the one thing that I would like to also add is that in any given situation, whether it is war or in a adversarial situation, what happens is that, as Commodore Singh pointed out right now, that where the Navy, where the Air Force is, where the Army is. But when you have a nuclear submarine, the Navy works in a very different manner, in the sense that while they are an integral part of your nuclear command and control authority, they also have to develop a certain degree of independence, which is worked into their training and their operational requirement. So even if communication is cut off, they will be in a position to actually provide a major and credible deterrence.
Okay.
This is a very important message that goes out to the rest of the world.
Okay, so that's about the nuclear triad aspect of it. But let's now talk about Arihant itself specifically and the overall ATB project. Kamal Singh, if we look at this, submarine specifically, starting with Arihant, which is the first indigenous nuclear sub. One, what are the characteristics, what are the specifications which we are looking at in terms of what we have and what the others have in this club? There are 5 other nations.
You see, the nuclear submarine, ballistic missile nuclear submarine is probably the most complex piece of machinery other than a spacecraft. And this is technology nobody is going to give us. So we've had to start from scratch, work through almost 4 decades, as Commander Abhijit Singh said, starting with trying to design a reactor. Finally, when we got onto the submarine, perhaps in the 90s, I think it's a great credit to our technological prowess, our sort of industrial partnerships. It's a combination of technology, public-private companies working together, getting the reactor going, getting the board going. And if you look at the timelines that we are talking of about 2 decades, it's not really something we should be concerned about. I know people have said it's taken too long, but countries which have been operating nuclear submarines for even 5 decades, when they introduce a new class of submarine, it takes them almost 8 to 10 years before they operationalize the first submarine of that class. Now here we were not only trying to operationalize the first submarine ever, we were also trying to get the whole structure into place. The whole command and control structure, the whole ecosystem had to come into place.
So it was more complex.
Far more complex for us to do it. We had our limitations. So I think credit should be given where it is due. We've done a great job. Now, having said that, it is still a work in progress. So as Abhijit very rightly said, I don't think we should go to town about it. We've told everybody we've done it. I think it needed the sort of visibility we gave it yesterday. But now we should again go below the radar, into the depths, and continue working on this. Because actual deterrence from a triad is effective when you can afford continuous at sea deterrence. That means one submarine must always be on patrol. Otherwise, your position is compromised. They'll know when your submarine is out and when your submarine is in. So we have to now work towards that. The second is, you mentioned the missile of 750 kilometers range. We have to go into a different level of missile. I believe we are pretty close to achieving 3,500 kilometers with the K4. But because the moment you go into a range of 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers, you've suddenly got a lot of sea space to operate from. Whereas at 750 kilometers, you're limited in the amount of sea space you have. You have to be that much closer to your target, which restricts your ability to move around freely. And that's where I bring in the comparison with the other navies. Of course, let's not compare ourselves with the Americans and the Russians who've been in this game for the last 50 years, and they've got, the Ohio class is 17,000, 18,000 tons. The Typhoon was 30,000 tons, the largest submarine ever built. But if you take even the Brits and the French and the Chinese, they're all in that plus 10,000 bracket, 10 to 15,000 tons. Even the Akula, which is actually an SSN, which should technically be a smaller boat, is 12,000 tons. So this is our first boat. It's 6,000 tons. It'll meet it's adequate for what we want to achieve at this stage. And from what I understand from the open media is that the 3rd and 4th boats will be larger. We'll keep progressing. This was manned by, this had an 83 megawatt reactor. We'll have to look at a bigger reactor. So it's a work in progress.
Okay.
It'll take a few years before we are totally, matured as a ballistic missile submarine operating navy. Okay. But I think it's a great start.
Okay, it's a great start, and it's a good stepping stone as well. That's
yes,
what you're pointing out. Let's bring in Commander Abhijit. Your views on INS Arihant specifically and the project ATB, which Commander Singh was pointing out.
I'd, for a start, like to echo what Commodore AJ has just said about the Arihant. I think it has significant capabilities, but I really can't say that this is credible minimum deterrence. We are a step closer to credible deterrence, but as the Commodore rightly points out, unless we don't have bigger platforms and a missile with a much higher range, perhaps the K4 or the K5, now there's talk even of the K6, we can't really say that this is credible minimum. I also think that it's only with the follow-on submarines, perhaps the Arighat or the 2 submarines that will follow after that, the S3 and the S4, that we will be in some state to have a continuous deterrent at sea, and that I think is critical. Unless you don't have at least three boats that can ensure that one boat is at any given time operational and at sea, I don't think you can claim that you have credible minimum deterrence. What I'd like to point out, just 2 things, is that one of the really important things that we have to be seized about is what we are looking at actually is a mix of 2 dyads in the Indian Ocean. One is this equation between India and Pakistan. The other is the equation between India and China. Now, we have to be seized of the fact that as we are developing our nuclear deterrent, the Pakistanis, who don't quite have an SSBN, are nuclearizing their war-fighting fleet, which is they are developing the Babur 3 missile, and their aim is to install the Babur 3, the nuclear-tipped Babur 3 cruise missile on their submarines, the Agostas, the Agosta 90B's Khalid class. Now, that will mean that there will be a great deal of strategic ambiguity in the India-Pakistan dyad. And the Pakistanis are saying that we are going to have full spectrum deterrence, we are going to deploy tactical nuclear weapons at sea. So we have to be concerned about the fact that whilst a lot of our capability development is aimed or rather sort of directed at China, the immediate impact of what we are doing is with regard to how the Pakistanis are going to react to this. The second thing I absolutely need to point out that there is a great irony in the fact that whilst our strategic submarine is coming online and it will sort of be operational in the next 3 or 4 years. We'll have 1 or 2 more boats, but on the conventional side, we are languishing. I think our tactical war-fighting submarines, that is the area that we need to now focus on. That strategic is all good and fine, but we must remember that strategic platforms are not meant for war-fighting.
So both things need to move hand in hand.
This, again, I mean, there is this impression that is being created in the media that once you have a strategic deterrent, you don't quite need to care about whether your tactical war-fighting submarines are... That side of war-fighting is the more critical side. So I would rather not have a strategic deterrent and have tactical war-fighting submarines than compromise on my tactical war-fighting submarines and have the Arihant and the follow-on classes. I think that this equation has to be very clear.
Okay. Saikat, your point of view when we talk about the strategic aspect of it vis-a-vis China and Pakistan, that's as pointed out by Commander Abhijit, and also the fact that Arihant is a good stepping stone, and we are going to move ahead when we talk about Project ATV as a whole.
So you have to give credit where it is due that there was some kind of vision, and you also have to realize, considering our economic and our other ambitions, indigenization is the way to go. And here comes the second major positive setup, and I think due credit to the Navy and our development establishment. You see, in many ways, the Navy has always been far ahead of its other 2 services when it comes to development. They work closely with the scientists, they work closely with the industry, and they actively participate, unlike the other 2 services. So that again is the second major success story. So you have a political success story, you have a technology and service success story. But the worrying part here is that while we had a company like L&T work very closely and build the nuclear submarine, our capability to make conventional submarines is woeful. I mean, for example, because of the HDW controversy, whatever capability Mazagon Docks had, and it had built up that capability to make its submarines, we lost that because of a large lag. Today, we have gone back to importing submarines like the Scorpion, and now we are looking at what is called Project 75A, which will be the next complement of submarines. This is where we need to start concentrating on, because if you look at Navy, because being the smallest service and having the least amount of budget, it always gets neglected. But if you look at all major threats that India has faced, it's always come from the sea, which is, the continental shelf has always faced challenges from the sea, and it is the sea which will prove to be very, very important from a strategic perspective. So on that ground, the kind of stuff we need to improve our naval capability, the boats are getting old, not just the submarines but also the ships. That needs a lot of work and a lot of focus to bring it on par and also keep it up with whatever has been approved so far.
Okay, let's bring Commodore Singh again on this. When we talk about the Make in India aspect, the points which have been made by Saikat as well as Commander Singh here, how do you respond to that in terms of having that balance between the conventional subs as well as the nuclear subs?
Both of them have said exactly, they've hit the nail on the head. Today we are really handicapped by the fact that we are not able to build a conventional submarine in India, and so we're dependent on foreign suppliers. Now the Project 75, the Scorpion class, which is now coming out, the Kalvari was commissioned last year, the second one is going to get commissioned a month from now. I'm not sure whether we've really been able to add the kind of value to indigenization that we should have done with these boats. And that's why we are going even again for 75I, which is the next program. We again are looking at a foreign partner. And the plan is that the third class would be totally indigenous. Now, if you have to build that third class to be totally indigenous in a sort of smooth progression of submarines coming into the Navy, then we have to start doing things now. We can't afford to wait another 5 years before we start setting up what we need to do for that. A submarine takes about 10 or 12 years to design and build, at least, starting from scratch. And so we have to start off with design. First, most important thing is design. First, you should be able to design your own submarine, only then you can build it. So we have to go, we still have a long way to go as far as indigenous submarine construction goes. Within the submarine, we have indigenized to a certain extent. The steel is, some steel elements are Indian. A lot of pumps are Indian, the piping is Indian, but fundamentally the submarine has to be Indian. And the weapons and sensors, we still don't have Indian weapons and sensors on board. So I think from the indigenization point of view, we have some way to go still. Again, as Abhijit brought out, we should not confuse the strategic program with our tactical and operational warfighting capability. Arihant is not going to go and fight a conventional war. Therefore, it is very important that we have a good SSK capability, that's the conventional submarine capability, and considering the sort of ocean space we have to operate in, 2 nuclear neighbors, aggressive, we also have to develop our SSN fleet. So those are nuclear submarines, but conventionally armed with cruise missiles. So we have to start now paying a lot of attention to that. This program had the benefit, and I can say this today, had the benefit of being sort of detached from a standard naval procurement procedure. Now start thinking a little out of the box, perhaps a little more, out of the box thinking, a little more bold decision making, where we need to waive the procedure. We should be able to waive the procedure. Okay. We are very unwilling to do that. So it's got to be a lot of innovative thinking, which has to be now done if we really want to keep pace.
Okay. Commander Abhijit?
I'd like to say that all maritime forces face certain dilemmas and predicaments as they develop their nuclear forces. One of the, and I can give you an example of say the Chinese, in the manner in which they developed their nuclear forces. The Chinese actually had a technology demonstrator way back in the 80s in the Type 92s, the Shia class that they had developed. The problem with that was that it was not fit for purpose, and they took close to another 20 years to now come up with the Jin class or the Type 94. Now the Type 94 is not really a technology demonstrator. It's much more than that. It is a full-fledged nuclear deterrent. It has the missiles, it has the ranges. It's another matter that Chinese are not very happy with the ranges. They want missiles that have 7,000 plus miles of range. But look at the 3 things that the Chinese focused on. One, they focused on command and control. And one of the things that maritime forces are always thinking about is that what kind of command and control system should you have? A system of positive control or negative controls, which means should you delegate authority or should you hold back authority and authorize the firing of a nuclear weapon, which is called negative control. So that balance you have to maintain. One of the problems I think in our case is going to be that because the Arihant is simply a technology demonstrator and that has just finished its first deterrent patrol, we perhaps may not be very sure of where that balance between negative and positive control lies. This balance is even more precarious when you're talking about, say, Pakistan that is trying to nuclearize its warfighting fleet, wherein you don't want to delegate too much authority because the commanders on the scene can then use the nuclear weapon and then that can lead to a further escalation. So that is one. Okay. The second is whether you want a sea-going fleet or you want a bastion fleet of boomers, which means that do you want your nuclear submarines to operate from a region that is secured by your own forces, which is close to your shores, or do you want that boomer to go or that nuclear submarine to go close to the enemy shores and fire? Again, that balance of negative and positive controls will be very different when you're thinking of that. So I would say that as we now proceed, we will need to consider all of these questions about command and control. Communications is again very important. How do you communicate with a submarine that is submerged in the depths? VLF communication is fine, but the US and now even the Chinese are considering deploying these planes that have these antennas that can do the VLF communication. So I think we are now in the second stage. The Arihant has been tested, but as we go in the future, we will have to consider these very complex questions of how exactly do we want to develop the fleet so that we have a complete hold over the nuclear deterrent, a political control over the nuclear deterrent, and I think that will be the way to go.
Okay, wonderful. Saikat, according to you, what's the way forward from here onwards?
So if you look at what happened post-Op Parakram, the Indian Army developed what they call the Cold Start Doctrine. And I actually met the general who wrote the counter from the Pakistani side, the counter to the Cold Start Doctrine. and they came up with this whole idea of tactical nukes. So every time we develop a certain kind of a doctrine or an equipment, the Pakistanis take the cheapest possible option, but which completely unbalances the kind of strategy that we are working on. So that's one side of the picture. The other side is, as far as the Chinese are concerned, I mean, for decades, the admirals in Pacific Command used to laugh at how easily Chinese submarines can be detected. But 3 years ago, suddenly admirals at PACOM realized that they just can't detect the Chinese subs anymore because they've become so advanced and they've become so silent that it's very difficult now to track them. So you see, both adversaries work in very, very different ways, but each one of them has a huge impact on us. So we have to take those things into calculation when we move forward. So because we'll have to develop with doctrines for very different kinds of, because one is very weak in terms of an industrial capacity, the other one is extremely advanced.
Okay.
That calibration we'll have to take care of when we look at our budgetary as well as our political focus as well as our procurement policies.
So we will have to take into consideration all kind of scenarios and all kind of options we have with us. But as our panelists have pointed out, with INS Arihant completing its deterrence patrol and India officially having a fully functional nuclear triad, this is one step which is considered to be very good as far as India's geopolitical situation and its strategy is concerned. We'll come back again next week with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.